Hi, this is Taylor with Mugwort and Moonstone.
And this is Colby, the Wandering Fool.
And we welcome you to Hectic and Eclectic.
She's hectic. Today I'm eclectic.
Yes, and this is a not-so-traditional witchy podcast.
The happiest of all Hallows Eve to you all. It is October 31st, Samhain, the witch's new year.
The best night of the year.
Hells yeah.
And we welcome you to this episode. This is our premiere episode, our debut episode.
Our debut episode.
Our debut episode. And we just wanted to say a happy hello to everybody. We're very excited to get this going. This episode is going to run a little bit longer than what a normal episode would for us. We're going to be aiming for about an hour typically, but today we are going to tell you about, us individually and sort of what we're into, what we do, things like that. And then we're going to get into some correspondences, some of our own experiences, the history of Samhain.
And we're just going to play around. So hang with us. See what kind of rabbit hole we go down. And hopefully maybe you're going to learn something. You're probably going to laugh at me because, well, you'll understand.
Give it time and you will certainly find the charm of Colby intoxicating, much like I do.
So before we get into educating the masses and bringing our knowledge and our weirdness to the table, we would love to start with our favorite subjects, and that's us.
Mm-hmm.
So, Miss Taylor, why don't you give these people some enlightenment as to who you are?
Sure. So, my name is Taylor Lynn. I have a small business that I'm working on called Mugwort and Moonstone, and I would consider myself an eclectic solitary witch. I have been practicing for a while now. I'm a professional reader at Enchanted Earth in Dunedin, and I work a lot with, spirit messages, animal messages. I consider myself more hedge witchy than anything. I like the traditional herbs and candles, things like that. I have dabbled in hoodoo and root work, and I'm really just learning and growing as best as I can, and taking the time to explore all the options open to me. And how about you, Mr. Colby?
Oh, dear. Well, hey, guys, I'm Colby Chance, the Wandering Fool, or the unofficial boy witch of Dunedin. Along with Taylor, I work at Enchanted Earth, and I've been there for a minute. I am one of the readers, psychic clairvoyant, and educator, healer, and all-around weirdo. A big part of my practice really is about divination. I do work in spell work and healing and all that stuff, but first and foremost, I'm a diviner. I do a variety of things. I do have a deep and passionate love for crystals, and specifically doing like crystal grids, and maybe one day we'll get to talk about that.
I'd love to.
I've got my own little gig going on with my witchcraft, the things that have been handed down to me, and really building off of these last almost 10 years for myself. And honestly, if you really think about it, just being under 10 years still isn't a really long time. Some of my mentors have been at this for like 30, 40 years, and on both ends of witchcraft and working as a psychic.
Sure.
So I'm still a baby witch in a way, but I felt like I've graduated into like maybe middle school. Because of course, I have students.
Right.
And people have been working underneath me for I'm 41 now. No, let me get back on subject. Sorry. I have had students I've been educating for, about 7 solid years, just about as long as I've been reading professionally.
Right.
Well, what is going on with Mugwort and Moonstone? What's the idea behind that?
So the idea behind Mugwort and Moonstone is sort of a kind of one-stoppy shoppy type business where
And this is online, right?
Yes, it's just online right now. I have a Facebook page. I'm working on getting some product done. That way I can, start up an Etsy, do that. But I'm looking at making some oils and some candles. Also personalized spell work, because
Yeah.
I do feel like that's a strong suit of mine, is getting the action. So I'm going to be looking at doing some of that. It's not necessarily going to be crystals and decks and books and things like that. It's more going to be personalized. I'm really into hand blending oils.
Witchery.
Yes. Just,
It's a witchery shop.
Yeah, there you go.
Online.
Yes.
So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, I'm very excited to get that going.
Yeah.
It's been something that I've had in my sort of percolating, for a little while now. So I am quite excited to get that done.
Well, I tell you, I have just absolutely loved working in a brick and mortar, not just metaphysical shop, but it is, of course, as we know, a pagan, Wiccan, and witchcraft shop.
Right.
I have been so spoiled and so fortunate to do that. And as I continue doing that, I'm trying to cross multiple platforms and social media. It's been a long time coming, but working on launching a YouTube channel. And also I've been doing Facebook Live on the Enchanted Earth Facebook page now for almost 2 years.
Right.
And I've really fallen in love with that because people are okay with my goofiness. So there's that.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a lot of writing, and there are things forming. Some people like to call them books. So that's happening as well.
Yes.
And I just feel, Taylor, you and I are growing in these new directions.
Yes.
And it's just so fun to see all of that happening.
Yes, I completely agree. I think, and you and I have talked about this before, but the difference, the way that we were a year ago, or even...
No, absolutely. 100%.
Especially even sort of the time that it's been from Imbolc, to Samhain coming up. I feel like we have both really made leaps and bounds and found new modalities to work within and really, connected with deity in a different way, in a stronger way, and sort of found, where our practice is leading us. And I think that that's really exciting.
I feel like this year has shown me that I really do understand who I am as a witch in this moment, my identity.
Right.
I have an easy time of explaining myself now, unless I just get speed up in my head and then I stutter and I lisp, and it's a whole thing. But that's something that I'm really taking from 2019 is understanding my identity and place in witchcraft in this moment.
Right.
And we know that we're ever evolving.
Of course.
So to have that moment, super, super cool. And as a teacher and educator this last year with working with the Witchcraft 101 Year and a Day workshop, who's just now getting ready to graduate in the next week from their freshman year, I've been able to watch these women who not only are students, but also you've become friends and sisters to me, being able to embrace my witchcraft and being able to pull elements from it that do resonate. And at the same time, individually growing in your own ways,
right,
which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Because I don't want copycats.
Right.
I don't. It's not cute. It's
right.
not fun.
Yep.
I want to inspire people to find their identity, as I've said, been able to really latch onto this year.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think, as someone who is a part of that class, it's really exciting for me to be introduced to so many different modalities and, ones that I have, especially with the divination and reading the smoke billets and fire scrying. It was something that I took to very easily, and I wouldn't have had that, if it hadn't have been for your classes. So,
woot woot.
Yes. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit about us. We're going to go ahead and get into the Samhain traditions and correspondences, a little bit of history. All right, so getting into Samhain. Samhain is also called Halloween. It falls on the night of October 31st, or technically the day of October 31st, but most people will work in sort of the darkness of that day as it is, bringing in the darker part of the year. It's also considered the witch's new year, and it's when the veil is the thinnest, and it's really the yearly apex of magic and divination. You're going to be seeing a lot of darker themes in your dreams and, observances that you have. It's the time that darker side of things, the darker aspects, have a chance to show themselves, and it's a little bit easier. It's directly opposite of Beltane. It's also a time for us to honor ancestors and, people from this lifetime that have passed. It's obviously much more somber than Beltane. Part of what it does is it brings intensity into your workings. You're going to get a lot more emotional over certain things.
Why is it so much more intense at Samhain?
Because, the veil is thinner. It allows those things to sort of, come through easier, and it really is peak witchy time.
Right.
It's the time that we can work those more intense inner magics. It's just the best time for that sort of thing.
And the veil that you're talking about is the energetic separation between our world, which is the physical world, and the spirit world.
Right.
Or the other side, or the underworld, or the Summerland, or heaven.
Right.
Whatever you want to call that other side.
Right.
It's the energetic separation, and during the month of October and even sometimes some of September, like this year,
right,
the veil begins to dissipate and weaken and lift, and so that flow between the two worlds really begin to circulate.
Yes. And during that time, you're also going to be feeling this shift from the lighter half to the darker half. And for some people, it's a subconscious shifting, but for people who may be a little bit more in tune, it's definitely something that you can feel. And I know you and I have gone through this before, where there's just this moment where you go, it's getting to be closer to Samhain. We can really feel that shifting. And I know for me, I'm not a super emotional person in my day-to-day, but I definitely feel that emotional tug that I wouldn't normally feel on a daily basis. I find myself remembering people that have passed on, and just having that be a little bit more of a tug than it normally would be.
The light half of the year versus the dark half of the year is more than just you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day. The light half of the year is the more surface, conscious, physical, almost masculine aspect,
right,
where the feminine, she's still there,
mm-hmm,
but she's not as predominant. She's in the background doing her work.
right.
And then as we shift into that dark half is when that feminine subconscious energy comes forward, and we start to get into deeper and deeper things.
Right.
I want to say something that I've noticed this year. From the spring equinox to the autumn equinox was a hot damn mess.
Mm-hmm.
It was shadow work. It was karmic lessons, blah, dee da, dee da, dee da, dee da. And what I'm noticing is as we have shifted into the dark half of the year, and we are now coming up on Samhain, that it's becoming the processing of what those months were.
Right.
Processing what the light half of the year was and embracing those lessons.
Sure. One of the most interesting things, because I like the relationship between the magical and the mundane, that's one of the things that I find really interesting about craft in general is how the things that we do on a day-to-day basis relate to the more magical side of things. So trick-or-treating is related in certain ways to the wild hunt in the Fae realm. And you and I have talked about this before,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so interesting to me to have that sort of correspondence. And I know a lot of people know the jack-o'-lanterns and sort of what that where that tradition comes from, but can you tell us a little bit more about like the similarities between the two?
So, okay. The Wild Hunt is part of fairy tradition, part of fairy lore, part of fairy mysticism. Not for nothing, the Cassandra Clare, who wrote the Mortal Instrument series,
Okay.
in her second series, which I'm sorry, it's not the second, it's the third series, which is the Dark Artifices.
I have to say, we're both really, really big into young adult fiction. So
Don't judge.
You're probably going to hear a lot about
Don't
us
judge.
comparing these things.
So she incorporates the Wild Hunt and her idea of it into that story.
Right.
And it is this band of rowdy fairies who travel in the night, in the sky, on their magical steeds or whatever, making mischief.
Right.
Sometimes some rough mischief.
Right. And what's funny is also Laurel K. Hamilton, who's one of my favorite authors, mainly because she writes really good smut. A little bit heteronormative, but it's still pretty good. She has she has a series of books. I think they're called the Meredith Gentry. It's the Meredith Gentry series, and it's all about the Fae. And she uses that symbolism as well, and she goes into what the Wild Hunt is and stuff like that. So I love that idea. I don't fuck with fairies,
right?
And that's a whole nother subject. But
so real quick too, the whole idea with the costumes and the trick or treating is to be camouflaged from the fairies of the Wild Hunt on Halloween, and the trick or treat is they're reenacting "Give Me a Treat" or "I'll play a trick."
Right.
It's very fae, very fairy, and even though fairy is more predominant at Beltane, with the veils, then we are also getting more interaction from the unseen world, from the fae realm, and those mythical ideas. So that's kind of where another take on trick-or-treating and the costumes come into play as well.
Right.
And then, of course, hiding from ghosts and all that jazz.
Yeah. So when we talk about the Witch's New Year, basically the resetting of the Wheel of the Year, it's bringing in another year, another round around the Wheel of the Year. And one of the things that makes the Witch's New Year sort of, or I guess I should say, some of the activities that happen during the Samhain, which is New Year, is you've got your divination, you've got your feasting, you've got your seances, and you've got your party. It's one of the things that makes every ritual sort of complete is that feasting, and I think that even plays into trick-or-treating as well, is that offering to people that you don't know, whether that's like literal people showing up at your door, but also it's that giving of those sweets, that candy to the unseen. Some of the other things that fall into the realm of work that you can do on Samhain or around Samhain are, crossroads work, conjure, root work, journey to the Summerlands, dumb supper, and ancestor battles, which we'll get into here shortly in a little bit more detail. But when you look at some different correspondences, for your herbs, you've got things like belladonna and mugwort, allspice, broom straw, catnip, mandrake root, oak leaves, acorns, squash, cayenne, dandelion roots, wormwood, and one of the biggest things, at least for me, is the use of calendula or marigold. I'm not Hispanic at all. That's not my culture, but even, the Day of the Dead, November 1st, it's sort of still all, you get those sorts of correspondences between the two. When you're looking at different symbols for Samhain, you can use things like gourds, apples, black cats, jack-o'-lanterns, witches, scarecrows, scrying mirrors or black mirrors, veils, skulls, cauldrons, pretty much anything witchy. So, some of the things that you can put on your altar, or at least some of the things that I have on my altar right now, are different, pumpkins and weird squashes, and we made a Halloween gnome at the shop this year for one of our classes, and that was so much fun. We have our besoms. So if we go from there into some foods, obviously have the squash, the pumpkins, you've got apples, nuts, mulled wines, meat, candy and sweets, pomegranates, which pomegranates are really big for me this year because I've just recently started connecting with Persephone.
Persephone, Persephone.
Some of the incenses that you can look out for are going to be peppermint, clove, cinnamon-based, patchouli, copal, sandalwood, sweetgrass, which is another favorite of mine. You're going to have those blacks, oranges, yellows, reds, white, gold, and silver for your colors. And then some different crystals. You can do black tourmaline, onyx, obsidian, garnets, hematite, selenite, bronzite, bloodstone, chrysocolla, and carnelian. And those of you who, work with crystals might in there have picked out the witch's shield, which I think is something that's really important for this time of year because, you want to be protected with the veils being thinner so that, you're not getting latched onto.
One of the reasons why I have such a great love for Samhain, other than it being my season, is those elements that you were just talking about, the herbs and the little oils, the incense, the foods, are some of my favorite things. I mean, we're sitting here right now, and I am that homosexual. I have apple candles going, I've got pumpkin candles going, and cinnamon candles going throughout the entire little hobbit house here.
So just off the top of where, like, my line of sight right now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 candles burning right now. 11 scented candles. And I have to say it smells divine.
It's magic.
There you go.
So a little magical in the mundane.
Yes, for sure.
These are fragrant candles. Okay, guys? It's some good old Bath and Body Works, some Michael's Arts and Crafts. But it invokes a mood within you. It helps to set the tone of the space that you're in. And we can utilize our mundane tools to help with that.
Right.
So it's just so lush.
It is.
It really is. It's lush. It is sexy. If you think about the colors of Samhain.
Yes.
Red, black, and white.
Yes.
Absolutely.
For sure.
But the deep, dark wines.
That ox blood,
yes.
Beautiful color, yeah.
Because we're still also in that Mabon as well.
Sure.
They just all start to tie in, and Samhain being the halfway point between the equinox and the solstice starts to incorporate both energies together when it comes to the colors and the foods and the this, that, the other.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about today is the idea of ancestor reverence. And I know that that's really important for a lot of people is, honoring those that have come before, and whether that's this lifetime or, past lifetime, sort of what your heritage is, what your heritage connected to. So probably the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to have an ancestor altar. So, it's another altar that you have set up, not necessarily your main altar or your working altar, but, its own separate little space where you've got things like pictures, sentimental items. You can have your scrying mirror on there, your gazing balls, offerings, different bowls of candy. You can have, those flowers, those favorite items of people that have passed on.
And put your spooky shit on there too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Anything that you're not utilizing for your main altar if you have one set up.
Right.
I love to put my sugar skulls there. I love that. I love that energy. And I've got a couple of other cute little things when I really do set up my ancestor altar. This year, I actually chose to place my items at work at Enchanted Earth in my reading room because of the energy that was created in that by Kim when she decorated.
Yes.
before anything was in there, I could feel Joey.
Mm-hmm. And just for people who don't know, can you tell us who Joey is?
So, and maybe we'll have this conversation soon.
Yeah.
But the Reader's Digest version, real quick, I went through my own personal awakening in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
and that was brought on by the devastation of losing my partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this was the man I was going to marry. As soon as it had become legal, and he lost his battle with lymphoma.
Mm-hmm.
He has been this beacon my entire journey, and it's just been over the last couple of years where he's begun to travel further and further on his journey on that end.
Right.
But this year, he was obsessed with Jack Skellington.
Uh-huh.
And so I have collected things over these last almost 9 years of Jack and Nightmare Before Christmas. And Kim kind of honed in on that this year, and it was the first time that she did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so my little office is just as nightmare and jacked out as possible.
Right.
And as soon as that room was finished with what she did, it was like Joey was just hanging out in there.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that was the thing that inspired me to bring some of my ancestral altar items, my pictures, and have them in that space. And I've never done that before.
Yeah, it's granted, I don't have a ton of time at the shop so far, but I have to say, Kim Truitt, the owner of Enchanted Earth, where we both work, is one of the most amazing decorators that I really have ever seen.
It's ridiculous.
She comes in and just completely transforms the space, and it happens several times a year, with the changing seasons and everything. She just comes in and creates this beautiful wonderland of twinkling lights and garland and leaves and tulle, and it's amazing.
She creates the story.
She really does.
You walk into fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing.
And the reading rooms, they each have their theme, and the token Crone's room of the shop is definitely that vintage farmhouse, elegant fall.
Yes, that's my favorite place to read,
but
for sure.
As you go further back into the shop, where you go into the sitting areas and the coffee and tea bar, is where it gets dark.
Mm-hmm.
And it's red, and it is black, and it is dimly lit, and it is skulls and crossbones, and just go to the Enchanted Earth Facebook page.
Yeah.
And check out the pictures.
Yep.
To see where we get to look, or where we get to work.
Yes.
And look, because I turn looks on the...
You know it.
Oh my God.
So one of the things that I want to give people some knowledge on, and some practical knowledge, is how to build an ancestor bottle. And this is the first year that I've done one under Colby's instruction. Colby, can you explain to us what an ancestor bottle is and some of the components?
Absolutely. So the ancestor bottle is something that you build quite often at the beginning of the month. It is a jar of herbs and rocks and sugars, and we'll talk about the components, but it's a layering of these magical items that begins in that more earthy protection.
Right.
And fortifying.
Right.
And beginning to call forth the ancestors.
Yes.
And then there is a layer of salt that divvies up, if you want to think of it, the physical and the spiritual.
Right.
And then above that salt break is where all the higher vibrational, God, that term, I mean, we use it, don't get me wrong, but I roll my eyes at the people who say that when they say it to me. Oh.
Yeah, and that's
Anyways,
that'll be a whole nother episode.
Yeah. I'm a butthole. It is what it is. We begin to incorporate psychic amplification, psychic strengthening, communication with the spirit world, but also, not for nothing, we're also putting in there abundance and prosperity, loving, positive energy, because this is an item that you will keep
Right.
at your altar,
Right.
within your home, in your workspace, wherever it's needed, to represent all of those elements. You do it every year.
Mm-hmm.
When you make the new ancestor bottle, then after Samhain, you take the previous year's bottle and you go and bury it. You bury it out your front door, your back door, or if you're that witch, you take it to a crossroads and bury it there. Or you scatter the remains or the contents in offering if you have a plea to the crossroad. It is a token of gratitude. It's also a token of thanks and just that final send-off of the year that's closing.
So if we look at what we used this year were smaller mason jars. They're not the teeny tiny ones, but I don't know what the ounce was, the ounce size, but
I want to say that was maybe an 8-ounce.
Okay.
A squatty 8-ounce or a squatty 4-ounce.
Yeah. So they're the shorter ones. They're kind of chubby. They're bigger in diameter, but they're shorter. The way that we built this was we took the first layer on the very bottom is graveyard dirt. For those who don't really know how to get graveyard dirt, obviously there's places that you can buy them online, but the best place to get them is going to be at the grave of an ancestor. And what you do is you basically go with an offering, something like flowers, coins, candy, kind of any of those traditional offerings. You can do cigarettes and booze as well if they're that type of person. You ask for permission to take some of the dirt from their grave. And this is really the foundation of the bottle. It's going to provide that anchor and that connection to the ancestors, but it also provides a lot of protection. And, people do use graveyard dirt in a lot of home protection. There's different things that you can use it for. So that's going to be the first layer. And then the second layer is red brick dust. And red brick dust is one of those materials that is very closely, it's rooted in hoodoo, root work, things like that. That again is a protective thing. Brick houses specifically are, some of the strongest houses that last the longest. So again, this is something that you can buy online, or if you have the ability to go out and find bricks, you can get them from places like Home Depot or Lowe's. But if you can find just even half a brick, will give you a crap ton of red brick dust.
For real.
And all you do is you take a hammer, you wrap it up. And
it's
then
bitch.
Yes. You crush the ever-loving shit out of it in order to get the red brick dust. So you would do a layer of that. And you kind of want to, we have probably 12 or 15 different items here. So you kind of want to gauge it by eye and just put a layer of all of these things on there to try to fill up the whole space of the bottle. So you would do graveyard dirt first, red brick dust second. You can also incorporate cayenne and paprika into your red brick dust.
Along with some sulfur.
So the next layer would be sulfur. Sulfur is used for purification, and it's an assister to the red brick dust. Then after that, you would take a couple of juniper berries and scatter some juniper berries in there. The juniper berries are not only really good for preventing theft, they're good for protection, psychic connection, and strengthening that psychic connection. Then after that, you have the dandelion root, which specifically when we used it this year, we put it in as a call for some assistance from Hecate and that crossroads energy and really connecting to the summer lands. After you put that in, you have a layer of, not necessarily a layer, but a good little pinch of clove. And that is really good for, stopping drama, stopping slander.
And that was a new item this year. That was a new incorporation because
really well.
We weren't able to get our hands on the belladonna in time.
Right.
And we wanted to keep with a certain number.
Yes.
And so clove was incorporated, and I don't know if I'm going to take it out.
Yeah.
Once I get the belladonna, I think it really marries
It really does. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It's plus, it's sort of one of those quintessential scents of
Yeah.
Samhain. So I think that that's a really good addition that we did this year. So at that point, if you have belladonna, this would be a good place to put it in there. If you wanted to take the clove out, put the belladonna in, or use them both, there's really no wrong way to do it. After that, you would put a layer of cinnamon sweet, which is a really good all around herb. Then that kind of concludes the bottom half of the jar. And the next jar would be a thick layer of salts. We like to use the coarse sea salt. Down here we have a Publix, so it's what, $3 for a big box of sea
Not
salt.
even.
Yeah,
It is under $2.
there you go.
I was schooling Miss Katie K.
Yeah.
The other day.
Shout out to Katie K.
What up, Kay? So she needed salt.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, it's a square box of coarse sea salt. I can't pronounce the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing I ever used, though. Oh,
Yeah.
gosh. Not RGO. Anyways, I'm a slacker on that. But I'm like, yo, that is like $1.86 for a good sized box.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, y'all, when you're buying salt, just saying, don't go spend $10
Right.
on 2 ounces of coarse sea salt.
Right.
Sorry, not sorry.
Salt is salt.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, it's going to be the same thing. So at that point, you are going to want to take the witch's shield, which Colby is.
All right, so the witch's shield is something that I really began embracing, like 5 or 6 years ago. And it's a combination of 5 stones. Now, the first stone is what keeps everything else clean, and that is selenite, because it is a purifier, and it's a wonderful tool to use when cleansing other stones. And that's why the selenite is in there. And then you've got both hematite and bloodstone,
Right.
which hematite is the shielder. And it shields from negativity, toxicity, bullshit. And then the bloodstone protects against the ooga booga, the unseen, nasty, gnarly ones. And then there's this combination, and it has to be in combination.
Of course.
There are a handful of things in witchcraft where I'm like, y'all, trust me, this is how I learned to use it. This is what I've found to be most successful, and others are successful with it.
Yes.
Is the combination of black tourmaline and bronzite. Bronzite, in my opinion, my perspective, interesting perspective, is the witchiest ass stone that there is, because it deflects hexes, curses, ill will, nasty, gnarly, spell casty shit. But here's the thing, the reason why we have to use the two together. And using bronzite in that aspect of shielding against spell work, all it does is it knocks it back.
All right.
And then this ping pong begins to happen, and that negativity boils and grows and grows and grows within the bronzite.
Ah.
So each time you hit it back, it gets nastier.
Ah.
But it's going to get hit back to you. The bronzite is bouncing it off. The tourmaline is catching it and pulling it and dissipating it back into the earth,
Right.
and nullifying that energy completely and totally.
Right.
And so that's a combination that I would not use bronzite in that capacity without tourmaline.
Right. That makes sense. All the stones in the witch's shield are
Selenite,
Uh-huh.
hematite, bloodstone, bronzite, and black tourmaline.
Yep. So, and the witch's shield can also be used as sort of a mojo bag where you can just keep those stones on you. I know I have one that I carry in my bra pretty much at all times. So it's a good thing to keep, on your person. So after you have the witch's shield and you put that down into the salt and sort of smush it down a little bit, this is where we're going to start getting into the higher vibrational herbs. So you're going to start off with peppermint. And peppermint's really good for not only hex breaking, but also love and healing. Then you're going to top that with rosemary, which is a really good all-purpose herb. For those that don't know, rosemary can actually be substituted for any herb. If you have a spell that you're trying to do, or candles or whatever, and you go, oh crap, I can't find this thing, just throw some rosemary in there. It works the same.
So you've got the sweet cinnamon all-purpose energy at the top of the bottom section. And then the peppermint too is kind of all-purpose, but it has some specific purpose that you were listing. But then the rosemary integrated with that, I don't know. Peppermint and rosemary is pretty groovy. Those layers marry the bottom section to the top section as you elevate up.
So after the rosemary, you're going to do a layer of worm's wood, which is personally one of my favorite herbs. And what that does is it helps facilitate that psychic connection and bringing the unseen into the light. Then after that, you're going to do a layer of mugwort, which increases message. And mugwort for me, especially things like mugwort tincture, are very elevating.
You want to try my mugwort?
Shout out to Linda. So mugwort is something that I really incorporate into almost all of my working, whether it's me drinking mugwort tea, which tastes like ass, but it really does help, elevate and open up.
So the best way, in my opinion, to take mugwort tea is with that red vanilla rooibos, which is caffeine free and already has this sweet tone.
Mm-hmm.
Some cinnamon sweet. Why? Because it's all purpose.
There you go.
And it gives it a sweetness, and it kills the bitterness of the mugwort.
So after you set the mugwort, you're going to take 3 acorns. They don't have to be perfect unless you're a Libra like me, and then they do. And what that does is it symbolizes you honoring the past, the present, and the future. Then to top it all off, you are going to call and sweeten your ancestors with a layer of sugar. So depending on sort of how you proportion all of these things, you can put a heavy layer of sugar on top if you have to fill the space, but you're going to top it off with that sugar.
I like sugar, okay? It layers perfectly. It is the essence of sweet.
Yes.
In its raw form. People will put in favorite candies to specifically draw in, or candy corns and things like that.
Right.
And that's perfectly okay. It's the same gig.
Mm-hmm.
But in a practical sense, sugar is just the best.
Right.
One other popular item, and the whole reason I just don't do it anymore, is I have made my fair share of ancestor bottles. Mm-hmm. A small token of them. I have started to run out of small tokens. Like, I don't want to go and destroy a shirt.
Right.
I already did that. So I don't do the sentimental thing any longer. The intention's already set in there. But that is an extremely popular thing that is done.
All right, so after you cap and seal your ancestor bottle, you are going to want to get 3 candles, a white one, a black one, and a red one. And the purpose of the white is to really just open the door. You're going to want the black one for that protection and grounding, and then red is used as a candle symbolizing rebirth. So you can either burn one at a time on top of it if you want sort of that layering thing again, or which is what I did this year, is I sort of melted the bottom of them and then just stuck them right to the cap, all 3 of them in the center of the cap of the ancestor bottle. And I just lit all 3 at the same time. Sort of depending on how much time you're looking at, you can do, those tiny little chimes. You can do...
I like the chimes.
I like the chimes too. You could do the larger tapers if you have some time to sit there, if you're looking at incorporating this into a meditation or something like that. After we made our ancestor bottles, we activated them that night by burning those 3 candles. But if you wanted to, you could wait until the night of Samhain in order to burn the candles to activate them. You would take this and place it on your altar, not only for that protection aspect, but also the ancestor connection. Like Colby talked about, the following year, if you wanted to make a new one for the Samhain season, you can bury it, you can sprinkle the stuff inside of it. I know a lot of people don't like to bury the glass because it doesn't biodegrade, and it can sometimes cause a hazard if it gets stepped on, whatever. sort of depending on what you want to do.
We're witches.
Being a witch is a hazard in and of itself.
I'm a hazard.
You
Oh
are
my
a
god.
hazard. That is a, not super quick, but a pretty quick rundown of making your own ancestor bottle. First of all, I'd love to hear if anyone makes their own ancestor bottle, sort of what your experience was doing that. I know for me, it wasn't necessarily an enlightening experience, but it did give me a sense of sort of that spiritual posse in the background and feeling them sort of huddling close and giving that hug that I hadn't felt a lot this season, but this definitely kind of kicked that off.
Real quick off topic to bring it back on.
Mm-hmm.
The parallel or duality of Samhain and Halloween.
Yes.
This is a time where I have begun to more and more embrace the aspect of Samhain and developing my traditions in there. Right. So Halloween has actually become this spiritual holiday this Sabbath. And so the ancestor bottle is something that's become a tradition for me.
Right.
And I love to incorporate it with the dumb supper you were mentioning earlier. Some call it also a silent supper. And essentially it is a dinner held in honor of our ancestors. And you eat in silence. While dinner is getting prepared and all of that's getting set up, the guests sit around in sacred space, like straight up, we are going to be calling quarters, we're going to be casting circle, we're going to do that up and we're going to do it correct. Mm-hmm. Because essentially this is a ritual. We create the ancestor bottles together and we talk and we laugh and we lace all of that positivity into the bottle. And then the burning candle part. As you process into the supper, you begin with the candle of life and purity, the white candle. And then as you go to prepare to sit down for supper, you light the black candle for the ancestry and for death and transition. And then once you are finished with your supper, you have eaten in silence, you silently get up and make your exit, and everyone leaves in their time. It's not like everyone gets up at the very end. That's not what happens.
Right.
It's one by one by one.
Right.
And as you are exiting, you then light the red candle of rebirth, that phoenix energy, and it activates.
Right.
And the act of doing that just has resonated with me so deeply that anytime that I get to do the full ancestor bottle and dumb supper, I will. Life's been busy in a really awesome way the last couple of years, and we have begun doing the annual seance on All Hallows Eve. So that's been just a wonderful new tradition that's been added in. Unfortunately, it has also caused to not practically be able to do a dumb supper in the same night as well.
Right.
So there's that. Was there anything else on the basic need to knows with Samhain?
The one thing that I don't think that we mentioned during the dumb supper is everyone will have a place at the table, and then there is.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. There is one space that's left empty but served just like everybody else with all of the courses in the meal, and that is the space for ancestors. That is the space for those that you have invited into the dumb supper. So yeah, that was just the one thing that I don't think got mentioned. One of the other things that I really wanted to talk about today was the connection of deity. Mm-hmm. So if we look at the correspondences of deities that do match, or sort of work within the time of Samhain, you've got Anubis, Osiris, Caradwin, Cernunnos, Pern from the Wild Hunt, Hel, Freya, Demeter, Hades, Persephone. But there's three that I really wanted to get into are the Morrigan, Hecate, and for me, Baba Yaga. Colby, you have a lot of experience with the Morrigan.
Oh yeah.
So what
yeah.
Oh yeah. I'd like you I'd like for you sort of to just give us a rundown
Yes, ma'am.
of your experience and sort of how she connects with the holiday.
So, right before I get into that real quick.
Yeah.
Working in the duality of the god and the goddess and that whole energy and Sabbats and whatnot, I find it interesting that Mabon, the autumn equinox, is very, very masculine, focusing on a little bit more of that god aspect. And then Yule, or the winter solstice, we're all like hanging out with the holly and the oak king and all of that masculine energy. But right in the middle is this like wicked goddess ritual.
Dark goddess.
Dark goddess ritual. So the Morgan, she is the queen of fairies. She is a goddess of war and sovereignty. She's fierce. She is fierce, and she is so cut to the chase in sometimes the most brutal ways to get you through shit. And the Morgan is my patron goddess, and I honestly have my own personal experiences to talk from on her. She's not normal or traditional like the Celtic pantheon or any other pantheon, really, where we often will choose to work with deities, and it's an easy transition quite often. Don't get me wrong, other deities will come to us. But the Morgan, she specifically calls out to a person and recognizes that magical being as a child of hers, the children of Morgan. The children of the Morgan begin to recognize other children, and that is how she communicates in a very specific way.
Yes. So just to interject here real quickly, we sort of have a joke at the shop where pretty much everyone who comes in and works at the shop gets this ping from the Morgan.
Yes.
And I personally experienced this because when I first started coming around the shop, I had a lot of information, and I was already working with, Norse and Egyptian pantheon, and I had my connection to deity, but I didn't know a ton about the Celtic pantheon. And, being around you specifically, I just, all of a sudden, it just made total sense that the Morgan was there. And then I started seeing the correspondences and the similarities between even, the Morgan and Odin, and, who I would consider, one of my patron gods. Just, there were so many similarities, like bam, 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 right after one another. And we sort of joke that everyone who comes into the shop eventually becomes a child of the Morgan, because we all have this really tangible connection with her.
Have I ever told you, and this is probably the geekiest thing you'll ever hear about me, my introduction and initial connection with the Morgan?
I know your story, which I'm sure we'll get into on one of these episodes, about that event. Is that what you're talking about?
That event, it is where it became more personal.
Okay.
But like the initial introduction.
Let me guess. Young adult fiction.
Even worse.
Tell me.
Even worse. So Miss Kimberly Truitt, our leader, chief, executor, like
shop
mama, she is talking to me about goddesses, and she starts really getting into her connection to the Morgan, and the Morgan, and the Morgan, and the Morgan. And I'm like, wait a minute. Are we talking about Morrigan? Mm-hmm. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, girl, I've been playing as the Morgan on Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for years.
I love it.
She was one of my lead characters. She was also part of the Night Stalkers video game as well.
Okay. Let me just interrupt you for a second, Colby, because I never knew that we had this connection. I used to play Marvel versus
High
Capcom
five.
too, but my team was always Magneto.
Oh my god, we have to get our hands on it.
Yes. Oh my god, that would be so fun.
When I want to kill,
Yes.
Cable,
Yeah, Cable. Yep.
Mega Man,
Mm-hmm.
and Wolverine.
There you go. Mine was Magneto, Cable, and Sentinel.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so back to the Morgan. Sorry, Goddess Morgan. We just nerded out on you. Samhain is one of her moments. Basically, there is this omega level dark goddess persona in pretty much every pantheon.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Morgan. You have Hecate, who you're going to be talking about. You mentioned Hell earlier, Baba Yaga. So this aspect of dark goddess, we're calling the dark goddesses forward, and we're honoring them, and we're loving them. So that's one of the reasons why the Morgan's so prevalent. I would say over the last 6 to 8 weeks in my private sessions with clients, I do have a secret combination in my lithomancy.
And for those who don't know, lithomancy is
A crystal divination. That's another topic.
Yes.
But there's this combination of stones that when they come out, it is the Morgan announcing her presence. And then usually that's going to be led by either the showing up of, her crows or ravens. Mm-hmm. Side note, bird whisperer, child of Morgan, Linda, over this last year has called all of these blackbirds. I mean, there's multiple birds that are coming into the yard, but we have crows and we have blackbirds. Ravens aren't super common over here.
Right.
But at any given time, there is a blackbird in our backyard. Yes. At the shop. So Morgan, as I said, is a little different. She calls out too. Now, in my experience, and this is somewhere where you have had more personal experiences than me, but last year, leading up to Imbolc, Hecate called out to me for the very first time.
Yes.
I'm beginning to recognize her influence in this last year for me, but you definitely have a higher level of devotee and knowledge to Hecate than I do.
So Hecate to me is sort of, she's similar to the Morgan in the way that she is a get her done goddess. She's the goddess of the crossroads. She's a part of the Greek pantheon, and she is sort of the goddess of death, but really, to me, she's more about those life-changing moments, those crossroads where you have a choice whether to follow your path or divert from it. And, she kind of presents the door, or presents the fork in the road, or presents the crossroads literally, and is, you should turn right. You could go left, but you should turn right. For me, it really started this past, I would say 11 months ago at this point.
Right.
So just a little bit of a backstory. I was living in Atlanta with some people who I'm really no longer associated with. I had moved up there. My whole family is in Florida. I had chosen to move away from home, from my safety net. And I think that was a really good experience, but it wasn't necessarily the path that I should have gone down. Hecate kind of showed herself to me. I kept seeing these big black dogs. And
right.
Part of one of the things that I see with the animal message that I receive is shadows. I have my little daemon, my little familiar, my little cat spirit that I've had since I was young. And so I would see her all the time, but I started seeing these big black dogs. And if anyone grew up on the Harry Potter series like I did, about the Grimm, and about how it's an omen of death and destruction and these horrible, horrible things. But that wasn't the sense that I was getting from it. It was
Right.
it was a protective spirit. It was a little hey, I'm here, and I'm around you, and I'm there in those moments. So I just started correlating these things, and I kept getting presented with these crossroads of these moments where I could either choose to follow the path that I was going down, or I could divert from it. And I feel like I've chosen correctly up to this point. And moving back to Florida, I got presented with these opportunities to, start working at Enchanted Earth, and really growing closer to sort of what we call our witch gang here. And
What?
witch gang? So I love it. Colby also just snorted. I don't know if the microphone picked that up, but that was adorable.
God.
So, she's just hard, tough love mama energy to me. And she just really, shows up and shows herself to me in those moments where I really need to make a decision. And I'm sure, like a lot of people, I know which decision I need to make, but it seems hard or it seems scary or whatever. And I kind of just take it as like, okay, I guess I'm going to take the leap of faith.
With this being my first year ever working with her, I see the severity of the lessons like I did with the Morgan the first year I worked with her, because they kind of have to scream at us.
Right.
And I am just now, come October, really beginning to recognize how she translated in my life over this last year, where crossroads with you, and I know that you have had your fair share of shadow work.
Right.
She has taught me to have a deeper understanding of what shadow work means to me, learning how to recognize this is what it is. Everything that has building up to the awareness and awakenness of the theme of the shadow work.
Right.
This is the first time I've ever gotten there.
Sure.
And it allowed me to consciously work on it and bring that to the surface and work through it.
Right.
And it's because of her.
Right. I completely agree. Speaking of shadow work, this, specifically around Samhain, this really is the time of we as witches or enlightened people or whatever you want to call us, we become more introspective, and we have this sort of moment of silence where we just get to sit in our decisions of the last year and sort of percolate on those things and see, what we could have done better, or, what went way better than what we thought, the way that it was going to go. So I just think it's really interesting that this half of the year is sort of the time for deities like this to come up. So one of the other deities that I really wanted to talk about was the Baba Yaga.
And I have no experience, so I'm going to sit back and listen to this story.
Okay, so a little bit of backstory. In our witch gang, we have this one woman. Her name is Darlene. Very, very dear friend. She is Slavic. We just happened to be talking a couple of, I'd say like 2 weeks ago at this point. I think I happened to mention the Baba Yaga. And Baba Yaga has been such a cool being to me, mainly in the aesthetics sort of thing that I've seen with her chicken house and her Witch of the Woods and her, gnarly appearance. Like, that to me is so interesting, and it resonates so much because, I've kind of not been a loner, but I've always been that sort of odd man out with the people that I've associated with.
You're odd.
I am odd.
You are.
We have these couple of days where Baba Yaga is being mentioned, or I've seen her. And so we had a scrying mirror workshop at the shop, and we, created our scrying mirrors, and we anointed them and got them protected and everything. And then we had a couple of minutes to where we could just sit there and scry with them. And one of the things that I saw almost immediately was this old woman, and she was sitting on sort of between two horses. And I didn't really know sort of what that symbolism was, because I know that horses are associated with Hecate, but she wasn't Hecate. She felt different. She was way more earthy and shamanistic, almost, primal kind of. As I was seeing this in the mirror, all of a sudden her face popped up right in front, like to the foreground, and it scared the ever loving shit out of me. I literally jumped and said, "Okay, I'm done," and put my scrying mirror down, because it was startling. It wasn't scary necessarily, but it was very startling. So as I was doing some research, was just Googling these keywords and blah, 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 and it popped up with the Baba Yaga. One of the coolest things about the Baba Yaga that I, learned is that she has a lot of connotations of being like this feminist deity,
right?
And she is kind of a hero and a villain in a lot of the traditional folklore, where she eats people, but in a weird way she helps people. So one of the coolest stories that I read from her sort of folklore was that she it's kind of a Cinderella story, where there was this beautiful maiden who was living with her wicked step family and her two stepsisters and her stepmom, and they end up sending her to sort of trick her to get eaten to the Baba Yaga. And the Baba Yaga gives her this like flaming stick to bring back, and it actually ends up burning down the house with her family inside of it. So she claims these lives, but she also frees this maiden. And a lot of the time she's portrayed as riding a giant mortar and pestle through the sky, and she's naked and she's wrinkly and saggy, and all of these sort of grisly imageries. But she also is an unassociated, unmarried, wild woman, and I love
Like
that
the
about
Morgan.
her, like the Morgan. So it's just interesting to me to see there's these these specific deities that come up that have like sort of this same theme. But I love the Baba Yaga and the chicken leg house, and it's just so good.
There's this running little joke that every year it seems like Samhain gets more and more intense. What I believe that is translating to is each Samhain that you go through aware of Samhain, you fall deeper and deeper in tune with that energy,
Right.
that apex of magic and divination, psychic ability, that stuff. I wanted to talk about just a few of the past rituals, more about the themes of the rituals. And so Samhain is always something to get extra about.
Yes.
And it's okay. We tend to always have a theme. And one of those themes where you can dress to the theme of it. We've done the sugar skull ritual. We have done the all white ritual. We have done the Morgan ritual, life, death, and rebirth. We have done rituals that centers all around divination. That was long. And when I talk about these rituals, let's keep in mind that they are open public rituals that we're doing.
Right.
And there have been rituals where there is maybe 20 people. And then there have been rituals where we were close to 80.
Wow.
Raymond Buckland has his big red book of spirit communication.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's interested in learning more about some of the traditional ideas of seance and old school ideas of seance, that's definitely a book to pick up. Last year's ritual was this whole essence of life, death, and rebirth. And it really grouped with me. And of course, all of this is happening at Enchanted Earth in Dunedin, Florida,
Right.
Our home base. And we keep we keep the information secret till the very, very last minute.
Of course.
We like to keep people on their toes. That's just our style. And I think that's really selling in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think that really covers the majority of what we kind of wanted to inform everybody of today, with this specific episode. So, Colby, what I would like to talk about now is what our plan is for this podcast and sort of what we're trying to achieve here. So, I know for me, I'm a podcast listener. I love, podcasts like My Brother and Me and fantasy podcasts like The Adventure Zone. I love the Witch Wave podcast and Psychic Teachers, but there, in my opinion, hasn't really been a funny yet concise sort of informational podcast where people talk about the, not only the data and the research of things, but also their own personal experiences. So, some of the things that you, the listener, can look forward to are, we're going to be talking about, actually our next episode is going to be appropriation in the witch community, what that means, how that's different for everybody, things like that.
And I think that topic right there, y'all tune into that, because something I want to acknowledge, and let me see if I can explain this well. Taylor and I aren't so far off in age, but there is a good 12 years.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of on the younger end of the Gen Xers, and Taylor's on the older end of the millennials, and we're both kind of part of that whole zillennial idea.
Yes.
But our perspectives and the way that we approach a lot of appropriation, we're both in this weird middle place.
Right.
Where we meet on the scale, but she more resonates with one side of the scale, and I more resonate with another side of the scale, just because of the environments and the decades that we grew up in.
Right.
And there are things we're both very, very passionate about. I think we would very deeply agree on them as well.
Yes, for sure.
And there's a lot of things where I will just look at her and be like, why?
Mm-hmm.
And she'll explain it to me. And then sometimes I'll explain why the why doesn't need to be why.
Right.
But we have a lot of these conversations.
Yes. Yes, we do.
So that's coming up.
Yes. And then we're also going to be talking about what it's actually like to work in a brick and mortar spiritual metaphysical shop. And
if we can schedule it, we will have the lovely and talented Miss Kimberly Truitt from Enchanted Earth, the owner and proprietor of the most magical place in the Tampa Bay area. Hopefully we are going to get her to come in and cut up with us for a little bit.
Yes. And then you can also look forward to some episodes on things like sex magic.
Whoop, whoop.
What it's like to be in the LGBTQ community and also be a witch.
Right.
Because we both fall into that, that community. I know I myself identify as a lot of things, but probably the easiest term for me, and again, this is my own generation growing up, is I would consider myself queer. Right. I'm different. I'm not a straight, cisgendered person. I sort of tick a lot of boxes. So anyway, that's a whole other discussion.
I identify as queer as well, because
right.
I'm not normal.
Right.
I'm just not. There is a YouTube channel, Laura Zakroff. She does 6 minutes of witchcraft. There is one episode, this is why I'm bringing it up, where she cites a few really great books, and I'm familiar with her Weaving the Liminal,
Yes.
which just came out this year. But
Mhm.
there's another author she talks about,
Okay.
and if there are those of you out there who are getting curious about where LGBTQ, witchcraft and paganism, and Wicca marry themselves together and new perspectives on that, check out that 6 Minutes of Witchcraft with Laura Zakroff.
Yes.
She's brilliant.
Yes.
Gosh, there's just going to be so much. And of course, guys, let us know what else you would like to hear. We are, of course, thinking about having stone of the episode and talk about that crystal and our personal experiences with them. Doing maybe even a tarot pull or an oracle pull to see, the energy that's resonating with us now. Of course, we're going to talk through the wheel of the year as we get closer to those different Sabbats. But a lot of it is going to also be about our magic.
Yes.
And things that we practice, things that we do, talking about perspective and talking about personal experience. Really just an honest discussion in witchcraft and everything that encompasses that world.
Yes. So, if you want to connect with us, we have an email address. So feel free to, get in touch if there's something that you want us to talk about, something that you agree or disagree with. We're definitely open to that sort of thing. Any corrections that you might have. Obviously, we are both still learning, as everyone should be. Our email address is hecticandeclectic@gmail.com. Again, that's hecticandeclectic@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram under Hectic Eclectic Podcast. And we are on Facebook under Hectic and Eclectic, a not so traditional witchy podcast. So you'll see a bunch of content going up there from us. We're going to be uploading to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcatcher. We're also going to be putting this onto YouTube for people to enjoy. So please get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Now, does Mugwort and Moonstone have an Instagram yet?
No Instagram yet, but we do have a Facebook page.
Okay.
I am on Instagram under Tarot by Taylin. That's TAYLYNN. And Colby is on Instagram at Colby333.
Also, I have my Wondering Fool Facebook page. It's a likes page. That's Wondering with an O, not an A. The Wondering Fool, and that page and the Instagram, they're both tied into one another. But I would love to see you guys on both of those. Also, visit us at enchantedearthdunedin.com or enchantedearthshop.com, which is our home base. And there you can see our profiles and the services that we offer. If you at all have interest in booking a phone appointment, a video chat appointment, or maybe you're local and want to come into the shop, give us a call at 727-216-6594, and that is the direct line to Enchanted Earth in Dunedin, Florida. That's Enchanted Earth, 733 Main Street, Dunedin. Enchanted Earth's been there over 10 years now. I myself have been there going on 8, working there, going on 9, that I'm a member of that family. Taylor, you're on your first year of being in the shop.
Yes.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has.
Also, Wednesday through Saturday, I go live on the Enchanted Earth Facebook page to do a universal reading. And of course, we're hoping to incorporate some personal messages in the collective for you guys as well. Oh my gosh, I think that might be it.
All right. Well, we hope that you guys have enjoyed. I know Colby and I always have a great time getting together and bantering back and forth. So again, get in contact with us if there's anything that you guys would like to hear. We hope that you catch us next time.
And on the next episode, don't forget, we're going to be talking about appropriation within witchcraft. So that's going to definitely be interesting. And also talking about working in a brick and mortar, and fingers and toes crossed that we will be cutting up with Miss Kimberly.
Yes.
Um,
So we hope that everyone has a very magical 2 weeks.
I hope you all have a blessed Samhain. Get out there, have some fun, and fuck some shit up.
Yeah. This is our time.
This is our space.
Be gay, do crimes.
I like that.
All right, guys.
Pieces.
We'll talk to you later.